Hi folks, welcome to this video on strategic pay plans and pay for performance. We're going to talk today about the total employment rewards or total rewards system. And all that really means is that all forms of pay or rewards given to employees for work performed as part of their employment. So we're looking at all the rewards, types of rewards that people could be paid based on the fact that they work for somebody. So when we look at that, we talk about that under the concept of compensation. So how should we compensate people? We make the point here when we're talking about pay plans that compensation could be extrinsic, which means it's everything that's direct compensation. So your pay, your benefits, whether your benefits be healthcare, dental, and your pension if you have one, and extrinsic benefits. Just the fact that you do the job because you love it, it's challenging, you get opportunities to participate in other areas of the company, maybe through job rotation, maybe they increase duties on your job, they enlarge your job, and you're just excited that they're doing that for you. They might give you opportunities for career development, job advancement, and even a note of thanks to say you're doing a good job, and maybe even bosses and other people who coach you on how to perform better. These are all intrinsic things that are part of a compensation package, things that may not have a dollar value, but they have a value to you internally. Compensation systems are strategic, okay, because again, their intention is to improve your performance in order to improve company performance. Some of the newer approaches to compensation are pay for skill or competence, so paid for the skills that you have, regardless of how often you use them. Pay for performance, so again, if you perform well, we might pay you well. And again, paying well could be not just your base pay, but it could be giving you access to certain bonus systems, or if you meet certain quotas, you get paid more. And then, of course, there's also individualized pay systems, which are called flexible benefits, where you get to choose some of the health care plans that you want based on the fact that you know you're going to use them. So say, for example, you have a dental package, and part of it offers orthodontics, so you can get braces and different things. Well, if you or nobody in your family needs them, you might not purchase that part, and you might use your money to improve your eye care, maybe to improve your medical benefits. So where you get some choice as to how you allocate any of the money that you're paying towards your benefits. So again, if we look at the total rewards or total employment reward system, we see it divided up into monetary or compensation based, which is extrinsic, and non-monetary rewards, which are intrinsic. Within the extrinsic, we have cash payments, which is your base pay, any merit pay, meaning that you might get a 2 or 3% increase a year, and any incentive plans, which could be bonuses. And the monetary or extrinsic piece also includes your benefits, as we said before, pensions, insurance, whether it be healthcare or dental, and vacation plans. So why is a fair and lucrative compensation plan important? Well, it helps you to attract workers. People don't want to work for you if it's not worth their while from a compensation perspective to do it. It also allows you to retain or keep workers because they'll be satisfied and engaged. It also helps you to comply with legislation. So again, making sure you meet minimum wage requirements, and the fact that your compensation system is non-discriminatory. So it doesn't discriminate and pay people of different genders, different religions, different color, differently because of those things. It also is important for you to be able to motivate workers with your compensation plan, and it also allows you strategically to recognize different jobs, specifically the level of skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions that each job has, and you can pay based on the levels of skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions for each and every job. So if we had to identify factors that would influence how much you pay your employees, if your rich uncle left you some money and you decided to start up a business, What factors would you look at? Well, they're internal and external. The external ones could be the employment standards legislation, which sets minimum wage, pay equity acts, which says equal pay for work of equal value. So if I have the teaching profession, which is predominantly female, and I have the electricians who are predominantly male, if those jobs are seen to be of equal value to the company, and we'll talk about how you establish value in a moment, if they're of equal value, they should be paid equally. That's what pay equity does. Human rights acts, again, the fact that we can't discriminate on what we pay people who are doing the same job to the same level of ability and achieving the same results. We can't discriminate based on their gender, color, religious affiliations, those kinds of things. Union influences also are an external factor that influence pay rates. So again, your collective bargaining agreement might specify what certain job levels are paid. Again, the availability of labor is going to be an important factor, because if you don't have enough labor, so there's certain jobs where there's skill shortages, as you know, skilled trades right now tends to be one of them. If there's a skill shortage there, what's going to happen? Well, if you can't get enough people to do the work, you're going to drive the wages up. If you have an overabundance of workers, then that means the competition isn't really stiff for a lot of companies, because there are a lot of these kinds of workers, whichever occupation that might be. So again, a lot of people might decide not to pay them as highly because they're easy to get. You can also experience pressure from your competitors as well. So if your competitors are paying more than you are, then guess what? You might not be able to attract workers as easily as they can. So you always have to have an idea of what your competitors are paying for certain jobs in order to make sure that you can remain competitive and hire good talent as well. You also have internal factors, so your own internal equity policies, which in terms of equal pay for work of equal value, and how you decide how you're paying people. And normally the job evaluation process is a key driver of any of our internal equity policies. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit more about establishing pay rates and the importance of job evaluation. Well, the first step for establishing pay rates is to have a job evaluation system. And to have that, you need to have job descriptions. So in other words, I can't evaluate a job if I don't have a job description along with the specifications for each job. Job evaluation requires that you examine each job in the company to determine its importance to the company. The more important the job, the higher the pay. So how we determine the importance of a job is usually a company puts together a committee of employees, and those people evaluate jobs. And the most common method to evaluate a job is a point method. And that just means each job is going to score a certain number of points. And how do we evaluate the jobs to determine how many points they're scoring? We compare the jobs based on what we call compensable factors, the factors that determine your pay. And those factors are 4. There's skill, so each job will be evaluated for the level of skill it requires, which is normally determined through the number of years of experience needed in education. Effort will also be evaluated in each and every job in order to score it and assign it points. And effort can be of 2 types. Mental effort, which means there's a larger thinking challenge in some jobs than others. Some jobs are a little more routine or rote. Some jobs are, you have to think through a lot more things. And the effort can also be physical. So sometimes it might not just be mental, it might be physical. Responsibility. How much responsibility do you have for people, supervision, decision making, authority, that kind of thing? The higher the level of responsibility, it's usually the more likely the higher you'll be paid. And we also have to look at working conditions. For example, do you work in excessive heat or excessive cold? Do you stand for long periods of time? Do you work in a dangerous area or where it's very easy to get injured? So those kinds of things, working conditions are also considered when we're trying to determine how much to pay somebody. So how do we conduct our job evaluation process? As I said earlier, we normally start with a committee. This ensures a fair representation and understanding of the jobs. And it could include employees who understand the jobs, HR managers, HR staff, managers, and even union reps if you're in a unionized environment. So then what do we do once we have this committee? We train them on how to use the job evaluation system. And what they do is they help us evaluate those jobs and provide points. And what we're going to do is we're going to categorize those jobs based on the number of points they score, and we're going to put them into pay grades. So I might say any job that scores between 200 and 400 points goes into a pay grade 2. Any job that scores between 401 points and 600 points goes into a pay grade 3. Any job that scores between 601 and 800 points goes into a pay grade 4. That's up to the company to take the work, the point evaluation done by your job evaluation committee, and translate those points into money. So when we put them into pay grades, each pay grade might be associated with a level of pay. So maybe a pay grade 2 gets paid on average $40,000 a year. Maybe pay grade 3 gets paid on average $48,000 a year, and pay grade 4 gets paid maybe an average of $65,000 a year. But based on the number of points you score, that determines your pay grade. So again, using a point method, jobs falling into a certain point range would be paid similarly or the same. So now, let's have a look at a point method job evaluation plan. So this is a fairly simplistic one, but you can see each of the factors is identified, the 4 compensable factors, and we have sub-factors that we're going to look at. Because somebody might say, what does skill mean? We can say that skill means education and experience and the level of interpersonal skills required for the job. Note that we're not saying how well you do in the job. That shouldn't determine the number of points that you score in a job. It's about the job. How you perform is determined when you have a performance appraisal, right? And the company determines how much they're going to give you in a pay increase or a bonus or whatever. So you have to make sure that you understand these evaluation plans are just evaluating, as it says here, the job, not how well the person does the job. Effort can be of 2 types, physical and mental. Responsibility could look at supervision for others and planning. And working conditions will look at your physical environment. Again, maybe extreme heat, extreme cold. And even here, it's a good one, travel. Some people travel a lot for their job. So again, if you do a lot of travel, that can be pretty grueling sometimes if you're traveling all over the world. So that's a working condition that needs to be compensated. So this company has basically said there are 4 degrees for each of the sub-factors that we're going to evaluate. So a person who needs very little education and experience could score 50 points. Somebody who needs a heck of a lot of education and experience can score up to 200 points on the job. So again, what we've done here is we've determined the lower limits and the upper limits of each of these compensable factors and their sub-factors. So what do we know? We know now that no job can score over 1,000 points because nobody can get more than 200 for education and experience and 100 points for interpersonal skill. So nobody can score more than 300 points for skill. Nobody can score more than 300 points for effort. And the same with responsibility and working conditions. Nobody can score more than 100 points. So you can see this company's decided that while working conditions are important in determining pay, they're not as important as skill, effort, and responsibility, because working conditions only comprise 10% of the total points that can be earned, whereas the other 3 individually have 30% of the total number of points that can be scored by any individual. So now, the second step in the establishing pay rates is to conduct a wage or salary survey. Look at what other employers are paying. So you can contact professional associations. So if you're in the HR profession and you want to know what you're paying HR assistants, HR managers, human resources professional associations can tell you that. You can go to government surveys. Even you can contact some of your competitors. Sometimes will share some information with you. So HR departments talk, right? So you might be able to get an idea of what other companies in your industry are paying. The other thing you could do is you could get a company to do a survey for you. So a lot of the big accounting firms like KPMG, Ernst & Young, BDO, a lot of the bigger ones have small business units. And what they do in there is they might undertake a compensation survey for you, their client, and they would go around and ask competitors and gather data to give back to you anonymously, of course, meaning that they're not going to say which companies participated and which companies had certain results, but they will give you the results generally so that you can get an idea of whether or not your compensation's competitive. So you can, again, when you conduct your wage and salary survey, you can establish benchmarks for a few jobs, and that can be a starting point for determining how much to pay other jobs. So for example, when we talk about a benchmark job, it should usually be a job where we have lots of employees in it doing the job, and one that is fairly common to other companies. So an accountant, an HR assistant, or an associate, an administrative assistant. These are jobs that companies usually have more than one person doing, right? And the idea is any companies that you want to contact, or companies that you want, say, a BDO or an Ernst & Young to survey for you, they could also look to what those benchmark jobs are being paid. So let's say a benchmark job was an administrative assistant, right? Well, we would expect that if administrative assistants in our company are being paid $36,000 a year, and other companies in the survey are probably, if they're paying administrative assistants $42,000 a year, we can expect that any of the jobs over that or under that will likely be better paid than our jobs. So again, we set some jobs as benchmarks just to get the process kick-started, so we get an idea of what other companies are paying common jobs where we know we can get a match. And it also helps us too to establish what we call external equity, to make sure we're competitive with the outside world. In the third stage, we would combine the job evaluation and the survey information to determine pay. So now we're going to start to assign pay rates to each pay grade. So we can use the information from the surveys to help us determine how much we can afford to pay. We can use the information that we got from our job evaluation, where the committee assigned points to jobs, to give us an idea of how we should pay one job relative to another. So again, a job that scores 400 points should probably be paid less than a job that scores 500 points. So again, we're establishing internal equity. Now, what we would do is we would develop a rate range, as we said before. Let's say a pay grade 2, we're going to say it scores between 350 and 400 points. And we're going to pay jobs in that pay grade between $37,500 and $41,500. Well, if a job scores 375 points, we know it falls into that pay grade, and it'll be paid somewhere between these two amounts. If a job scores 450 points, we're not putting in a pay grade 2. It's likely going to belong in a pay grade 3. You see? And then we'll have a different range of points there. So again, an employee will be paid somewhere within this range in our example, depending on their experience and seniority in the company as well as performance. It is very important for a company to make sure that their external and internal practices and policies are up to date in order to make sure that they're paying employees fairly. So in other words, they need to make sure that they maybe do compensation surveys on benchmark jobs and other jobs on a regular basis. Maybe every couple of years they'll survey different jobs. And it's very important to review job descriptions as they keep changing in your company, because maybe your company's restructuring, maybe they've gotten rid of certain levels of jobs, and maybe some jobs are now taking on some of those duties that were left when other people left the company. So it's important to know who's doing what, because it might affect the number of points their job scores, therefore affecting their pay. So again, we can take all the points that the job scored, and we can look at their average wage rates on a per hour basis and decide, even if we're hiring new people, how much we might pay them. So say, for example, we've got somebody here who scores 450 points. We can go up to this line and we can say we should be paying that job around 19, or maybe around 19.50 an hour, whatever that is, right? So we kind of know what we should be paying them. Now again, that's for internal equity purposes. If we find that job we've hired for, that job scores 450 points, and the skills that we're looking for are in very short supply, we might decide we want to pay more than 19.50, right? So here's a guy here, way up there, who's scoring around 450 points, say. Well, that person might be paid $22 or $23 an hour. Why? Maybe because there's a skill in short supply. Maybe because they've been doing the job for 30 years and they keep getting increase over increase over increase. So they're we refer to them as outliers. So they're outside of the normal wage rate curve, right? They're outside of the normal wage rate curve, but there's a reason for it. So we kind of circle them. We refer to them as outliers. We kind of circle them because we know the reasons that they're not falling into phase with everybody else. All right? And we just note that because now we won't say every person that scores 450 points and their job is going to get paid $22 an hour. There were reasons for this that we don't expect to be repeated. So again, we try and manage our compensation system by identifying these outliers. How can we correct out-of-line pay conditions? Again, we've always said actual wages don't always match market wages, but some are really out of line. And like we said, some out-of-line conditions might mean people are underpaid. So let's say somebody is, if we go back to our previous example, let's say somebody scores 450 points in their job and we're only paying them $15 an hour, right? Wow. That's really ripping them off because they should probably be getting $19.50, right? So sometimes we find that some groups are underpaid, so we'll have to give them a pay increase. Some people are overpaid, like we saw our little outlier there, right? Up here at $22 an hour. That might mean because they've been in the job so long, they don't fall into phase with everybody else. They might need to be red circled, which means maybe their pay is frozen for an indefinite period of time until, the rest of the wages catch up to theirs. Now, generally, such a big difference in a pay rate might not happen overnight. That it kind of everybody else kind of catches up to that $22 an hour. But the idea is that it could be that you don't want to demotivate the person who's sitting at $22 an hour so that they never get a pay increase for the next 3 or 4 years waiting for others to catch up. So the idea here might be that, well, instead of giving them a merit pay increase, don't forget merit pay increases would do what? They'd say, we're giving you, excuse me, an extra 2 or 3% pay increase a year. Maybe what the company might decide to do is just give them a bonus, which doesn't get added to their pay. So they might calculate what that 2 or 3% is and say it's $3,000 or $4,000. They might cut them a check for $3,000 or $4,000 or make a deposit into their bank account, but it's not getting added to their base pay. So if they were making $50,000, they're not making $54,000. They're making $50,000 plus a bonus. So that way their base pay, the base pay of other employees who are getting these merit pay increases will phase in. So they will eventually catch up to the guy making $22 an hour just by virtue of the fact they'll be getting those merit pay increases. But the guy who's red circled, he's going to be getting these bonus payments, right? So there's a way that even if you have to red circle them so you don't change their base pay, you can still keep them motivated by giving them a little bit of bonus pay, because they're red circled and they're in a wage freeze. We can also transfer them or promote them if they're qualified so that they can move into a pay range whereby they're scoring more points and the number of points they score aligns with their pay. So for example, this person here, if we can find a job that has around 600 points or maybe even 700 points, you can see that they won't be as out of line if they're in a job that's only scoring 450 points, if they qualify. Now, it's not still quite equal, you can see, but the idea is there. If we can promote them into a different job that uses their skills and abilities and they're well suited to it, why not? Now again, some companies might decide that they want to freeze the wage for 6 months and they might want to look for opportunities to transfer to current pay rate. So in other words, what they might do is they might say, well, look, we can keep you red circled. The other thing we can do is we can lower your pay. So we'll find another job, where you're not overqualified or you haven't obviously been there 30 years, and find a job where you fit into. Now, that's not the common tact to take. These two are usually the most important ones, because who's going to want to take a pay cut? Nobody, right? So again, but it would be up to you, but most people wouldn't do that. Now, how about if we had other professionals like lawyers, accountants, engineers? Sometimes research scientists fall into this category. Sometimes the compensable factors in putting points on their jobs are not easily measured. So it's not as easy to measure creativity, problem solving, those kinds of things. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't score their job for them. We certainly can. But sometimes if these professionals are being sought after by a lot of other companies and we want to keep the best ones that we can with us, then what we might do is we might use more of a market pricing approach. We would still do the point a factor system to evaluate the job to make sure that we have some internal equity, but I think the majority of how we pay them would be determined by market pricing. Our next series of slides will look at trends in compensation. So I'm going to cut off here because your next series of videos will start off in trends in compensation. Thank you for listening.